In this video, I'm going to be looking at topology in MeshFlow. Specifically, we're going to be looking at quads, triangles, and n-gons. And what I've got here is I've got two objects. Each of these strips has got the same geometric layout. The topology is the same. It's just the difference between them is these lower strips are all flat and these strips are curved. The reason for this is that I want to demonstrate that you can't always see bad topology. So there often is an argument in the work of really talented artists that they don't worry about good topology because they know when the topology counts and they know when it doesn't count. It's the case that you can have bad topology, but if it's on a flat surface, it doesn't matter, it's not going to affect the model. What I'm going to demonstrate is what happens when we subdivide these surfaces. I'm going to put a turbo smooth on them. The first thing that we can see is that for these first three, the surface looks fine. This one, which is the triangles, it's got rounded corners, and we'll have a look at the geometry as to why that is. And then you can see on this fourth one, we have this kind of unusual lighting artifact. Let's look why this has happened. If I turn off the turbo smooth, you can see that up here we have quads. When it turbo smooths, we get quads, and so we preserve this 90-degree corner. Down here, we don't have quads. We have a triangle, and we have edges leading from this corner. And when I subdivide, you can see that that edge got pulled in. Over here, we can see that this geometry looks fine, and if we look at the geometry in terms of the vertices, we can see there's some extra verts in here that we couldn't see just by looking at the wireframe. And it's these vertices that are going to give us the problem, because if we start to subdivide, you can see that we get this weird artifacting where that vertex was. Interestingly, if I keep subdividing, the artifacting goes away. So in other words, this section that was twisted, it was literally overlapping geometry, has been pulled and stretched out, and that has got rid of the problem. You can see that this surface looks pretty good, but we can just about see there's a problem right here on this end. There's this little tiny indicator that something's not quite right, and again here we can also see another lighting artifact. So it's often the case that people look at these and they add another subdivision on it and the problem appears to go away, and they think, oh, that's okay, it's fixed. You've just made it harder to find the problem. If you can see a problem, try and fix it. So that's the flat surface. I'm just going to delete this. What about these curved surfaces? This is all quads. This is quads with a triangle and an n-gon. This is all triangles. This is quads at the top with n-gons followed by another invisible n-gon at the bottom. If I go back down the stack and look at the edit poly, you can see there's our quads. You can see that we have our triangles sitting here. We can see that we have our quads and a whole mess of triangles. And then you can see we have quads, and then we have different variations of n-gons. If I turn on the vertex mode, this did look like a quad, but now you can clearly see there's some vertices hidden in here, and that means that it's actually an n-gon. Let's look at what happens when we subdivide this surface. So we have one subdivision on the surface, and hopefully you can see that this quads version is a pretty good representation of the refined surface. In other words, it approximates what we would expect the curved surface to be. There doesn't appear to be any artifacting. On the triangle section here, we can see some artifacting. We can just see a little bit of change in the lighting. Doesn't look quite right. And you can probably see that it looks like there's a kind of a shear where this has made a Z or a Zorro mark inside this line. And if I select the geometry, you can see there's a relationship between this edge and the actual lighting. So instead of being a nice smooth line that we have with the quads, this line goes up and down and around. When we look at the strip with all triangles, you can see that we've got some distortion in the lighting. It's not a smooth continuous surface. When we look at the n-gons, we can see what looks to be a twisting of the surface. It's not smooth and it's not continuous. If we zoom out and move around these surfaces, we can actually see how some of the buckling has actually changed the shape. So your geometric layout, when you subdivide, can change the actual contours of the model if you don't have your geometry in the right place. I'm going to turn up the subdivisions, and we can see that what happens is that we get a refinement, but it doesn't make the problems go away. We can still see some error here. This is starting to smooth out. These pinch points are starting to go away. And again, if I add a couple more subdivisions, you can see that the lighting is smoother, but it's still basically wrong. Another important point to note is that when you add a subdivision, typically in most algorithms it will convert everything to quads. So in other words, even though this was originally made out of triangles, and this was an n-gon, and this was made out of n-gons, when we look at it, you can actually see that now everything is made out of quads.